They call him enemy number one on Wall Street. Why would the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times launch a coordinated media hit piece on the CEO of Coinbase right now? Is it because Brian Armstrong is operating like a bank? Or is it because he refused to give the banks exactly what they wanted? While you were watching the charts, a six-figure ad campaign was launched to convince the Senate to kill stablecoin yield. The banks aren't afraid of crypto falling. They are terrified of crypto winning. They are terrified of the $6.6 trillion that is about to leak out of their outdated vaults and into the hands of the people. Wake 'em back, everyone. This isn't journalism. This is a financial war. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Atlas Steps, and today we decode the monopoly's final stand. Let's look behind the curtain of the mainstream narrative. In late 2025 and moving into February 2026, we have witnessed a coordinated, relentless, and systematic attack from the titans of traditional media, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Brad Garlinghouse hit the nail on the head when he called out the New York Times for their recent crypto hit piece. This isn't just bad journalism. It is a deliberate omission of facts. Where was the headline when a judge criticized the SEC for failing to follow a faithful allegiance to the law? Where was the front page story when a different judge found the SEC's actions were arbitrary and capricious? They stay silent on the legal victories of the industry, but they scream when they can advance a false narrative of illegal wars and regulatory failures. Now, the focus has shifted. The Wall Street Journal has dubbed Brian Armstrong as enemy number one on Wall Street. Think about that title for a moment. They don't call him a fraud. They don't call him a criminal. They call him an enemy. Why? Because Brian Armstrong is refusing to let the big banks dictate the terms of the new financial system. He is fighting against bills that would strip you of your yield and force you back into the hands of the legacy monopoly. Do you remember 2020? CNBC, Fox News, and the rest were screaming that crypto was dead. They told retail investors to stay away while Bitcoin was at its lowest levels. That was the bait. While you were being told it was crashing to sub 1,000, the institutions were silently building their entry points. Today, they are using the same playbook. They label CEOs like Brian Armstrong as enemies because he is the only one standing between their profits and your financial liberty. The most dangerous part of these hit pieces is what they don't say. They don't mention that Brian is fighting for a vibrant, competitive market that protects consumer liberty. They don't mention that his position actually decreases Coinbase's short-term profits in favor of long-term societal health. They want you to see a rebel. I want you to see a defender. Are you reading the story they want you to hear, or are you analyzing the system they are trying to protect? Let's talk about the $6.6 trillion panic. While the media is busy painting Brian Armstrong as enemy number one, the real battle is happening behind the closed doors of the Senate and the White House. We have entered a pivotal moment with the Genius Act, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stablecoins. Signed into law in mid-2025, its full implementation is the battlefield of February 2026. The banks are currently lobbying with every cent they have to ensure this act includes a yield ban. Why? Because they know their business model is obsolete. Just days ago, Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan issued a stark warning to Congress. He cited Treasury Department data, suggesting that if stablecoins are allowed to offer interest or rewards, as much as $6.6 trillion in deposits could flee the traditional banking system. Think about that number, $6.6 trillion. That is roughly 35% of all U.S. commercial bank deposits. This is what keeps the CEOs of JP Morgan and Citi awake at night. They are terrified that you will realize you don't need a savings account paying you 0.01%, when a stablecoin like USDC can offer you 4% or 5% with near instant liquidity. The banks aren't just lobbying. They are launching six-figure ad blitzes. Groups like Case for America are flooding the airwaves, urging senators to side with community banks over consumers. They call it closing the stablecoin loophole, but let's call it what it really is: financial hostage-taking. They want to stop you from earning money on your money. They want to force you to park your capital in their vaults so they can arbitrage it, reinvest it, and keep the profits while you get the crumbs. Eric Trump pointed out a reality we all know too well. Why can't you send a wire transfer after 5 p.m. on a Friday? Because the banks want to clip interest on your hundreds of billions of dollars over the weekend. They want to control the flow. They want to slow down adoption. And they are using the Genius Act as a weapon to prevent crypto companies from offering rewards that look like interest. This is why Brian Armstrong is fighting back. If he wanted a monopoly, he would support the ban on yield, because it would force more users to keep money on Coinbase without Coinbase having to pay them a cent. Instead, he is arguing for a level playing field. He is arguing for a positive-sum capitalism where you, the consumer, win. The banks hate this because they cannot compete with the efficiency of a blockchain. They can't compete with the transparency of the XRP ledger or USDC. So, they try to kill the competition through regulation. The question isn't whether the bill is good or bad. The question is, who does the bill protect? Does it protect the bankers' yachts? Or does it protect your right to a fair return? Are you watching the loophole they talk about? Or are you watching the door to your financial freedom? Legacy institutions have made a fatal mistake. They have mistaken a defender for an aggressor. The media calls Brian Armstrong enemy number one. But let's look at the philosophy behind his actions. While other crypto CEOs are rushing to sign any bill just to get it over with, Brian is standing his ground against the Genius Act's restrictive clauses. Some critics argue that Coinbase just wants to become another big bank. But the data tells a different story. If Brian Armstrong wanted maximum profit for Coinbase, he would support the ban on stablecoin yields. Why? Because if the law prohibited yield sharing, Coinbase could hold billions in USDC, earn the interest from treasury bills themselves, and pay you zero. Instead, Brian is fighting for your right to earn that 4% or 5%. He is arguing for positive-sum capitalism, a system where the provider and the consumer both win. The banks, on the other hand, operate on zero-sum. For them to win, you must lose. For them to have record profits, your savings account must stay at 0.01%. The real reason Brian is enemy number one is that he is proving the banks are redundant. When we look at the size of Coinbase compared to a giant like Binance, Coinbase is actually a smaller player. But they are a crucial player because they sit at the intersection of Wall Street and the future. The banks aren't fighting Coinbase, the exchange. They are fighting the idea of self-sovereignty. They fear a world where the average American can move value across the XRP ledger or through USDC without asking for permission on a Friday afternoon. We are seeing a desperate ad blitz from groups like Case for America. They are spending six figures to tell senators that stablecoins drain deposits. Let's translate that. They are admitting that their service is so poor and their interest rates are so predatory that the only way they can keep customers is by making the competition illegal. This is the protectionist trap. When you can't innovate, you legislate. Despite the hit pieces, we are hearing that the renegotiations of the stablecoin bills have gone well. Brian Armstrong has indicated that progress is being made to protect the yield. This is why we stay calm. While the New York Times screams failure, the industry leaders are in the room, protecting the infrastructure of the next decade. The banks are throwing everything they have at this because they know the clock is ticking. Every day, the Clarity Act and the Genius Act move forward without their yield bands is a day the monopoly gets closer to collapse. Are you distracted by the enemy label, or do you see the man protecting your seat at the table? We are currently witnessing the final siege, six-figure ad campaigns, the coordinated hit pieces in the Wall Street Journal, and the constant fear-mongering about deposit outflows are not aimed at the technology. They are aimed at your conviction. The banks know they cannot win on a level playing field. They know that the XRP ledger, USDC, and the Genius Act represent an upgrade they cannot match. So they do what every dying monopoly does. They try to make you feel like the criminal. They call Brian Armstrong enemy number one because he is making it possible for you to exist outside their system. The media wants you to look at the volatility and the legal drama and say it's too risky. But remember the lesson of 2020. The moment the headlines become the most aggressive is the moment the institutions are the most terrified. When they scream loophole, they mean your profit. When they scream risk, they mean their loss of control. I stand with the innovators. I stand with those who renegotiate for the best societal outcome rather than the quickest corporate profit. If the bills are good and leaders like Brian Armstrong agree with them, it's because the yield, the very thing that makes crypto a superior financial system, has been protected. The banks can spend their millions on ads. They can buy the headlines of the New York Times, but they cannot buy the math of the blockchain, and they cannot stop a movement whose time has come. As we close this analysis, ask yourself one question. Why is the world's most powerful financial cartel so afraid of a piece of digital code? It's because for the first time in history, you have an alternative. Don't let the noise of the legacy media drown out the signal of the revolution. The hit pieces will fade, the ads will expire, but the infrastructure we are building today will stand for decades. Stay focused on the yield, stay focused on the utility, and above all, stay calm. Thank you for watching. Pause, pause, pause. In a market driven by impulse and noise, clarity becomes an advantage. A simple reminder: speed creates mistakes, while calm evaluation creates strength. Take a minute to appreciate it and for being part of a community that values logic over emotion. Patience is discipline. Rational thinking is protection. As always, the future isn't something to wait for. It's something to prepare for.